Welcome all. In this video I will explain constructors. And what we have here is a class rectangle. So again, a class is an own data type that we can create. And when we create a variable of data type rectangle, we can store the width and the height in this variable. Furthermore, we have two setters here. So with the setters we can change the value in width and in height. Furthermore, we have two getters to get the value in width and height of the rectangle. And finally, we have a function here named area. And this function calculates and returns the area of the rectangle. So now to create a variable of data type rectangle, we can use the following syntax. So we start with the data type, which is rectangle in this case. And then the name of the variable, so for example R. So R is here the variable name, and the data type of this variable is rectangle. So in this variable we can store the width and the height of the rectangle. And to store the width and the height of the rectangle, we use the setters of this class. So we can say R dot and then set height. So this way we change the height of the rectangle. So for example to 5. And by using the setter for width, we can set a value for the width of the rectangle. So for example 6. Set width. And furthermore, we can use the function area to get the area of the rectangle. And to print the area, we can use this syntax here. So we type the name of the rectangle, which is R, because we named our variable here R. Then dot and then area. And finally, we have to use rounded brackets because it's a function call. And to call a function, we always have to use rounded brackets. In this case, the rounded brackets keep empty because this function does not require any inputs. So let's run this code here. So we see it prints 30 because we assigned the value 5 to the height of the rectangle and we assigned the value 6 to the width of the rectangle. And 5 times 6 is 30 and therefore the value 30 was printed on the console. So imagine that we have more rectangles. So to make more rectangles we make more variables of data type rectangle. So also for this rectangle we can assign a height and a width to this variable by using the setters like this. And we can also print the area of this rectangle by using r2.area. And now when I run this code again, you see it prints 30. Oh, sorry, I made one mistake because I used 2 times the setter for height. We have to use a setter for height and for the width. So now you see it prints 30 because the area of rectangle R is 30 because 5 times 6 is 30. And then it prints 200 because the area of rectangle 2 is 200 because 10 times 20 is 200. And what you see here is that for each time we make a rectangle, we need 3 lines. So 1 line to make the rectangle and 2 lines to assign the height and the width to this rectangle. And yeah, you can imagine if we have more member variables, because we have only 2 member variables here, but if we have more, we even need more lines to create a single rectangle here. And this can be more efficient, and to do it more efficient we can create a constructor, and this allows us to create a rectangle and also assign values to this rectangle, or at least assign values to the height and width of this rectangle in a single statement. So to create a constructor, we go back to the class and we define the constructor under public. And the constructor is a special function which is called when a variable is created of data type rectangle. And the name of this function is the same name as the name of the class, so rectangle in this case. So therefore we start here by typing rectangle, then rounded brackets, and then curly brackets. And between the rounded brackets we place the inputs of this special function. And in this case we want to pass the width and the height to this function. So we can say double and a W and double height. So this variable we use for the width of the rectangle, and this variable we use for the height of the rectangle. And inside this function we can say width equals W and height equals H. So again, we have a constructor here, and this is a special function that is being called when we create a variable of data type rectangle. So that means it's called at this location. So on line 63 and also on 67, on these lines, we create a variable of data type rectangle. And that means that on this location, we call automatically this function here, which is called a constructor because it's a special type of function. And this function requires two inputs, and for that reason it gives us now an error because this function is called but requires two inputs, and therefore when we create now a variable of data type rectangle, we also have to pass two inputs. So therefore now we have to add rounded brackets after the variable name, and between these rounded brackets we have to pass the inputs. For example, 5 and 6. Yeah, and therefore we can remove these two lines here. The same we do for R2. So we pass the input values 10 and 20. And what happens now is on this line, so on line 63, so when we now create a variable of data type rectangle, the constructor is being called, and the value 5 here is being passed to the width, so to W, and 6 is being copied into H here. And then in the constructor, W is assigned to width, so therefore the width becomes 5, because in this variable the value 5 is being stored, and the height becomes 6 because H is 6. Yeah, so this way, in a single statement, we create a variable of data type rectangle, but also assign a value to the width and the height of this rectangle. So let's run this code once more. And now you see it still prints 30 and 200, because for the first rectangle we assigned the values 5 and 6 to the width and the height. And for rectangle R2, we assigned the values 10 and 20 to the width and the height of the rectangle. However, note, when we want to create a third rectangle, without passing inputs, we get an error. So we cannot create a variable anymore of type rectangle without passing the width and the height of the rectangle. If we want that, we have to create another constructor without inputs. So what we can do now is type rectangle here, rounded brackets, then curly brackets. So now we created another constructor, but this time without any inputs. And what we can do here, for example, is assign the width and the height to 0. So when we go to the main function now, so we create a variable R3 of type rectangle. So again, the constructor is being called, and the constructor that's being called matches with the number of inputs. Since we have no inputs for R3 here, then now this constructor is being called, meaning the width and height is being assigned to 0. And for R and R2, the constructor with 2 inputs is called because we pass 2 inputs with creating the variable of data type rectangle. Yeah, so for these 2 variables, this constructor is called because we pass 2 inputs. And for this variable, the first constructor is called, so this constructor, because we do not pass any inputs. And let's also print the area of R3. And let's run the code here. And you see here, finally it prints 0 because the area of R3 is 0. Yeah, because we did not pass any inputs here. So therefore the first constructor is called, which is this constructor. And when we call this constructor, the width and height is being assigned to 0, meaning the area is also 0 because 0 times 0 is 0. One more note, because let's now change here 5 to -5. And now you see it prints -30 here. So with the setters we avoid that we get wrong values to the member variables. So with wrong values in this case I mean negative values to the width and the height. And we do that by checking the inputs of the setters here. And the same we have to do also for the constructors, because via the constructors we also can change now the width and the height. So therefore we also have to check the inputs at this location. Yeah, so we start this constructor by checking whether W or H is negative, because if it's negative we also want to throw an exception, similar as we did with the setters here. So we can check whether W is 0 or H is smaller than 0 or H is smaller than 0, and then we want to throw a negative value exception. So now when I run this code again, you see it prints a negative value for width or height is being used. So that's it for this video. In this video we have seen constructors.